Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Educator Playground podcast. I could not be more excited for today's podcast. I have my dear friend Elise Foster here. We're going to be talking about her book that she co-authored, as well as all the other exciting things going on in her world. And I always, as always, have my beautiful, amazing, brilliant podcast co-host, Shiva Rashada, joining us. And we're just going to have a fun conversation today. And it is going to be all around leadership and effective communication and really how we ignite and foster that inner genius in all of us. And it's just such a through line to everything that I talk about, that I embody. And so from the moment that Elise and I met, and we just realized right before we went live, that it was in fact in early 2013. And we went from, oh my God, I see you and I meet you and nice to meet you. And all of a sudden we're fast friends and like we had known each other for decades, maybe lifetimes, because our work is so similar and we are so in values alignment with our mission and our purpose to really amplify the inner genius in humans, especially in the world of education. So welcome, Elise. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. And I think as I was listening to your story, I was reminded, like, we must have been meant to meet. We share the same birthday. And,
yes. Exactly. When we realized that, it was like, oh my God, birthday buddy, yay.
So I'm really glad to be here. I'm excited to see where our conversation takes us and have some fun exploring these ideas with you two beautiful ladies, and we'll see where we go.
Love it, love it. So I'm going to kick it off with just kind of the generic question I start with everything, and then we'll kind of get into the book is why are you passionate about education and lifelong learning? What is that core of passion for you?
So the first thing that comes to mind is when I was in high school, I always thought I was going to be a teacher. My mom was a teacher, so I was going to be a teacher. And then I had enough people. I worked in a pizza place, and a number of the customers would kind of talk to me, and they're like, well, what do you think you're going to do after high school? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go study education. I'm going to be a math teacher. And enough of them looked at me and said, like, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? And I think it had more to do with me than it had to do with the profession. And they're wondering, like, how would I do in front of a room full of unruly kids, or potentially unruly kids, knowing, who I was. And so I think I've always had this interest in helping people grow and bring out the best in themselves. And as I've done more and more of this work, the thing that just keeps becoming more and more obvious is how much more complex the world is becoming. Yes. And how important it is to be curious, to question our assumptions, and to really start to notice and take a closer look at what's happening around us so we can better adapt and be nimble to everything that's changing around us. So I think, trying to do that, thinking stuff, mm-hmm. And going, okay, well, I've got that education, I'm done. Without a lifelong learning mindset, it's really a fool's errand to try to live in the world that we live in. We can't kind of close the book on learning, in my mind, when our formal education stops. And I think that's a big part of why I do what I do, and a big part of helping people start to just question the things we think we know so we can get curious about what's happening.
Absolutely. Shiva and I have talked a lot about, the students that she's, with every day, and really how key that curiosity is to really ignite and spark that with them, and seeing that brilliance. Shiva, do you want to share even examples of how that's showing up in real time for you?
So this year I'm teaching, so I teach 6 classes, and 3 of them are their senior classes. It's AP Lit. And so I encourage them. I don't even allow the students to say or to use I think or I believe in their statements whenever they're responding to whatever text that we're studying, because I want them, and I've said this before, Sandy, to feel like they're flying with a net, right? It's always about, if you have an idea, and if this is where you're at right now, you're the authority. If you can provide the textual evidence, then how you feel right now is what it is. these things will grow and they will change as as you move along and as you learn more. But that's the thing. You're always going to learn more. And as you learn more, you're even more of a real authority as you get it. And so I really, really do push them to do just that, to question everything, to be inquisitive, to ask good questions. And sometimes in a class session, we may not have all of the answers, but it's the process of the questioning and remaining curious. I said, that's what's going to take you not just through college, but through life.
Yeah, that's so crucial. And I think, and Elise's book has like been one of the mainstays in my world as I'm coaching leaders in education. And the Multiplier book was originally written by Liz Wiseman for corporations. And then she partnered with Lois and Elise to actually write it for education. And so, Elise, will you talk a little bit? I mean, I could talk for days about it, but I would actually rather everyone who's watching actually hear it from you. And what are like the key learnings in this book, and really what drew you to write it, I guess, is where we should start.
Yeah, and I want to put a placeholder on a question, Shiva. I'm so intrigued by them not being able to say I believe or I think, and I'm so curious, like, what do you have them say? So maybe we can talk more about that a little bit later, but that it just really piqued my interest. So I'll start with what drew me to the book, and first say I'm a math science person. Reading was never my strength. And we happened to be on a trip. I was walking through the Minneapolis airport, and there was this beautiful display. Ironically, I have this book on my desk of a book that looked just like this. And I'm like, well, that's really pretty. And I, read the back cover, and I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting. So for this admitted non-reader, I finished the original Multipliers in about 2.5 days. And I was like, oh my God, this sums up my experience of things that I couldn't put words to that I was experiencing in organizations, and recognizing, why are some leaders really good at growing their teams and other leaders really terrible at growing their teams? And why do some leaders do that? Oh, wait, I do that. And really this kind of, this awakening of putting some language to what I was experiencing. And so that's what drew me to the original book. And then I started doing some work with it. I reached out to Liz and I said, hey, I love this stuff. Can we work together? And I first started delivering the Multipliers workshop, and then she invited me to co-author the Multiplier Effect. And both of these books really they sit at the intersection of collective intelligence, curiosity, and questioning. And the core question of both books is essentially like, why do some leaders amplify intelligence while others drain it? We call the leaders who amplify it multipliers, those who drain it diminishers. And as I've been working with this now for almost about 12 years now, and not quite, about 11 years, what we find is it's easy to talk about it in the binary, multiplier or diminisher, but there is much more of a continuum. And in fact, a lot of the diminishing that people talked about in our interviews and in conversations, a lot of that diminishing actually comes from really good intent. It comes from really good leaders who want to do the right thing, and yet without recognizing it, they're having this diminishing impact. And I think the fundamental skill of the multiplier, the piece that really sets multipliers apart, that allows them to essentially access more intelligence from the people they work with, is their undying curiosity. It's like this insatiable curiosity, and recognizing that they don't know everything and they want to know more. And so they have this really, really strong willingness to hold what they know lightly enough so that they can notice and pay attention to what's happening around them. And I think this has just come back into view recently. Dr. Ellen Langer of Harvard, amazing researcher, centers around mindfulness. She said something in a podcast I was listening to, and she said, when we think we know something, we stop paying attention. And that's my sense as to what's happening with a lot of accidental diminishers and diminishers. We see a teacher who isn't kind of meeting the mark in a particular way. And we think we know why. We think we know what's happening in the classroom. And so we come in and we try to handle it based on what we know. And if we can hold that lightly enough, we have a greater opportunity to actually really get more in tune with what's happening, notice and be curious together about it, to find ways to grow the intelligence of both of us, of the classroom and of the school.
Absolutely. And it's really, as I'm coaching and have been, using your work for the last 10 years, is really helping leaders see how it is that unintended side, that unconscious behavior. And so as I teach the evolution of consciousness and kind of wrap in all of these different tools and strategies and learnings, it really, the accidental diminisher piece is a key component to that self-awareness as a leader to then grow into an intentional multiplier, right? And to really do it on purpose versus like, oops, I didn't know, which we can all do, and we still do no matter what in life, right? But at the core of it is to really just that awareness, to take that first step of awareness to go, oh, I really don't mean to micromanage because I don't want to be micromanaged, but if my team is feeling micromanaged, then there's a component where I'm micromanaging, right? If that's how it's landing, even though I don't intend to, if I'm, and so I even catch myself, I was going through getting ready with, I hate to call her my assistant. She's so much more than that. Raina is like I would not survive without her. We're going through and getting ready to send out invitations to a nonprofit event that we have coming up in November for Genius School. And I have her like putting all the emails in all the people that I want to personally invite and email addresses. And, she was getting ready to do it. And then I realized that some of the email addresses were wrong, but she wouldn't know that information. It's just, I know it because they're friends of mine. And then I'm like, I'm really just trying to not micromanage the work that she was doing, but give her the information that and so because I'm mindful of it, I'm able to have that conversation and also add in, the language as I'm Slack messaging her back and forth, like, hey, I forgot to tell you, versus, hey, you did this wrong. And so can you speak to a little bit about that? And then I think it'll tie into your question for Sheba of like how we use that different languaging, right?
Yeah, there are a handful of things that have come up for me. And I think you named something really important. And one of the questions we often get, so accidental diminisher tendencies come in a lot of different flavors. They're things like the idea fountain, the leader who comes in and they say, okay, what are we going to do to, improve student engagement? And they, throw 7 ideas up on the board, and then they look across the room and they go, okay, hey, Sheba, what do you think? Sandy, what do you think? And you're both looking at me going, you just told us what we're supposed to think. So what else do you want from me? And it's not done from the leader's perspective because they think those are the right 7 ideas, but they think they're like, planted, sprinkling seeds, spreading seeds that are going to germinate into these beautiful ideas. They're going to spark thinking. And instead it kind of shuts people down. And I'm explaining a couple just to highlight the point I hope I'll make. Another one is the rescuer, and it's the leader that doesn't like to see people fail. Catastrophic failure is not an option. So what do they do when they start to see someone struggle? It's really simple and it's really benign. They offer a hand to help. And I see Sheba nodding her head. And if what you're thinking is different, I hope you'll say, when we offer that hand to help too early or too often, we steal the vital learning opportunity for somebody to grow into it, to make the mistake, to learn how to do it their way. And often people are like, but these are things I got hired for. Like I got hired because I had the ideas. I got hired because I didn't let bad things happen. So you're telling me I can't do that anymore. And so it's, as you move into leadership, it's a big transition to say, okay, wait a minute. I see the train's about to go off the track. All right, what do I do? And being conscious of signaling, hey, I see something bad is about to happen, and I want to offer this hand to help right now, but I'm going to pull myself back out once we get back oriented on the track. And so kind of using that kind of language and around the idea fountain, if we're in a pinch and we've got to get something out the door, hey, I'm going to throw something out right now because we've got to get this out the door. And the next one, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to do it differently. And so some of it's contextual, but without the awareness that you are just fitting into this mold that you've always fit into of having the ideas or making sure the train doesn't go off the track. It's way too easy. It's a pathway that is well built. Your body's comfortable in it, and it will stay in that lane until there's some kind of tension. And that's a really good clue. When you start to see, this is another common thing that I see often with the rescuer. When you've hired somebody and you hire them and you were so excited from the start, you thought they are going to be brilliant. And then 6 months later, you're going, what happened to this person? That's often a really good clue that maybe you're doing a little bit too much rescuing. They were new in that first 6 months, first 90 days, they came in, they had a couple questions and you solved all the problems for them rather than engaging them with a handful of questions. Like, what are you already thinking about this? Where are you most stuck? What help are you looking for from me? And seeding them with questions that help them own the problem and continue to build there and grow around the problem.
Yeah, I love that. And so to your question for Sheba about, okay, what do you want them to say, right? What are you encouraging them to say versus I believe or I think?
So they just provide the answer. So again, right, with this rescuer thing, and I teach English, so I'll make that very clear. I don't want, or early in my career, I found if I said, okay, what's the answer? And if they say, well, I think, or I believe, or this, they felt like there was a right or a wrong answer. Mm-hmm. So when I feel, or not even I feel, I don't even mind feeling. You can feel a certain way, but if we take I think or I believe off of the table, and they just answer the question like the authority. So right now we're reading Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. So for any of the listeners who know that book, you have Macon Jr. dead, who's the husband, and you have his wife, Ruth Foster. They have two different accounts of the story, but none of my students really believed Ruth's story. So I said, why is it so hard for us to believe women? And we're using the literature to talk about issues that happen today as well. And without that, I think or I feel, but just providing the answer, they are responsible for also providing the evidence. And what I have found as an English teacher is this increases their level of thought. It places the onus of responsibility to do that mental work on them. And then my papers and my discussions as we move on, my Socratic seminars are richer, they're more meaningful, and it's a space where students can gently challenge, their peers or their classmates, and that's how we grow as learners. So there's not even a sentence, especially not for seniors. Mm-hmm. There's no sentence frame there. You just tell me what it is. You tell us what it is. And if you have the evidence to back it up.
That confidence, right? And building that self-trust and self-confidence and self-awareness those are critical life skills.
Yes.
That as they grow to become leaders, within organizations, within running their own companies, whatever that they're involved in, those intangible skills, right, are going to serve them so well. And when we think about how that relates to the multiplier effect, is that you're modeling a multiplier style of leader within your classroom for your students, right?
I didn't even know.
I did.
If you don't mind, if I can just give just one quick example. So I've looped with my students. So I taught 9th grade English last year. The other half of my roster are 10th grade students. And I find that my students are more engaged in the discussions. They have no problems presenting. Their writing is more flushed out because they do have that confidence. Mm-hmm. And so, so the rescuer style, I've abandoned that. It took me about a decade to get there, but.
Right. Hey, that was a decade faster than a lot of people. So,
yes.
the thing that struck me and what you were talking about is this, the right or wrong answer and the binary. And I just did a thing in my daughter's school for the 11th and 12th graders around telling their career story, like not their career stories, more of the who am I? When someone asks you in an interview to tell me about yourself, how do you talk about that? And we started talking about red flags and green flags in an interview and different things like that. But I had this sense that some of them really wanted the answer, like, what do I need to say? And I think that not in all schools, but in many schools, students have gotten so accustomed to there being a right answer, and you planting the seed with them that there isn't a right or a wrong way. It's how do we talk about it? How do we have confidence in what we bring to the table? And also, how do we create space to cast a little bit of doubt on what we know? Because I think that is where maybe full-on diminishing comes in, is when those leaders have the confidence, they know the thing, and then they aren't willing to back away from it. They aren't willing to say, oh, that other perspective might be right too. Because that's a little bit of what I hear in the story is there are these two accounts, and they both have truth in them. And how do we access that?
Yeah, it's so brilliant. I love hearing both of you talk about really how this plays out in real life, right? Is, often there's books that we read, and I have several that, I'll start reading and I'll, pull what I need and leave the rest, and I'll come back to it. And, I tend to have 10 books going at any given time because,
Multipliers wasn't the only one on my desk.
Tendencies. My own must have wisdom from all places desire. But really just the practical application of this book is what has always drawn me into it. And it's similar to how I was drawn into Tony Hsieh's work with Delivering Happiness. And, little, words not coming to me. We have Jen Lin coming on in a couple of weeks that we're going to talk about Beyond Happiness, which is going to be an exciting conversation as well. But there are certain books, Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment, The Multiplier Effect, The Delivering. There's these books that for me have played such a crucial role in how I show up in the world, as a leader, as a friend, as a mom. It translates across all the roles that I play in life. And then there's books that just nuggets inform them. And the multiplier effect for me, and then I'm going to stop fangirling, is, it literally is just one of those books that the core message of it, that the depth and the usability of it, that allows us to really look in the mirror in an authentic way, not in I'm a bad person and I want to shame my behavior way, but in an awareness way. And it unfolds in an allowing us to uncover our best leadership capacity as well as that of others, and really creating that ripple of impact, as we talk about often, so that we can actually inspire and influence in the world, which is what we all kind of crave to do when we're in education.
Yeah, your all of that had me kind of, it had me going through a lot of different stories in my head. And I think the thing that's standing out to me is the awareness is absolutely critical. And I think it's awareness of your behaviors, but more than that, what sits underneath those behaviors. So a really, really good question for leaders to ask is, if I did the opposite of this thing, if I did the opposite of micromanaging, like I let them go off and do their thing, like what's at stake for me? What's the worst thing about that? Like, what am I afraid of? Yeah. And ask that a few times to get a little bit deeper. And what brought that to me is this, for me, one of the hard things is control. Like, I have a process. If I follow the process, I know I get the result. And I'm going to give a really silly example. I love to decorate cookies. And I have a way I decorate cookies. And I remember when my daughter was very young, Like she would decorate with me, and this is supposed to be like a fun thing.
She's not following the rules.
Decorate cookies. Luckily my daughter still decorates cookies with me, but I gotta believe when she was young, she did not have any fun, because well, what you do is you outline it first and then you do that. And it took me far too long to realize, like, she can decorate the cookies however she wants. And it doesn't matter if they look good or not. And oh, by the way, she has some really clever ideas that can't get onto the cookies if I keep telling her exactly how to do it. And so it's, for me, one of the things has been kind of letting go of that control and going, you know what, the outcome's going to be the outcome. And at the end of the day, cookies don't matter. Like, nobody's life is at stake if these cookies look ugly. Are they edible? I mean, like, if there's something not, that's going to make someone sick, then we got a problem. But it's also the other thing that came to my mind. And I always tell people, like, most of my very best leadership lessons come from my daughter, who's now 14, but I've been learning them every year along the way. As you were talking, we talk about the accidental diminisher. I always joke about the accidental multiplier, that leader who's so busy diminishing someone else that they let you go off and do something brilliant. And
yeah.
I think they're out there. I think they exist. It's a little bit more tongue in cheek than in reality. But it reminded me of a time when my daughter was young. She was in kindergarten, and my husband had ruptured his Achilles. So he was like on the couch, couldn't move. I was actually taking Claire out to the pumpkin patch to go with some friends. And I'm trying to like navigate all of this stuff to make sure Chad has dinner and Claire's changed for the pumpkin patch, and I'm changed because I just came from a thing. And I'm like, well, Chad, what about dinner? And he's like, oh, I'll just do a sandwich. And then I'm like, okay, well, let me go get changed. And Claire's like, no, I got the sandwich. And I don't even know what I said to her at the time, but I'm kind of like, no, don't worry about it. I'll be back. Like I got this. Mm-hmm. Went up and changed. I came back down, and the sweetest, maybe not fully nourishing sandwich appeared at my husband's bedside table next to the couch. And it was like, she figured out how to pull the chair over to get the plate, to get the bread, it had all the stuff on it. It might've been like one piece of turkey. It might've been like a 5-year-old size sandwich instead of an adult size sandwich. But that was a really important learning. Like, you know what, if you give people space to try the thing, like if they know what the outcome has to be, they're going to figure it out. And that is the core fundamental assumption of multipliers, is that people are smart and they will figure it out. Now, of course, there's context involved, and there are other factors at play. If you don't define the outcome, it's going to be really hard for them to figure it out, and I don't mean define it like you need to have this exact thing, but if you don't set the direction in some way where everybody's clear on that, it'll be really hard to figure it out. But if you hold the opposite assumption, which is, people won't figure it out without me. Mm-hmm. Like for me, like Claire's never going to figure out how to make the sandwich without me. They're probably not going to, or it's going to take them a lot longer. They're going to need that accidental multiplier to come around. They're going to need me to go off and diminish someone else to be able to grow into that.
Yeah. So much wisdom in all of that. And I think parenting sometimes, all the time. I was going to, play it lightly. All the time has been one of my greatest teachers. Right. And that getting to this place now where Hunter's 21, and that we've developed this really beautiful adult parent-child relationship because I've grown to trust him versus having my ego involved in his outcome, right? And trusting that the universe has his back too, right? And to actually recognize, and I say this very explicitly to him, my only goal and wish is that you're happy, healthy, and safe. And so I'm going to give you advice and my opinions on those things. And at the end of the day, you're going to make your own choices. At the end of the day, you are going to actually make whatever choice you're going to make. And I love you unconditionally, no matter what choice that is. But I'll tell you if I think it's going to violate your happiness, your health, or your safety. But aside from that, I'm good. Go live your life. Like be free, do you, like, because that's where he's going to have such a vibrant life of experience. And to your point, decorate cookies however he wants, because he gets to. And his cookies may be better than I don't make cookies, so I'm not.
I make enough for all three of us. Really.
Oh, yay!
Okay,
Somebody has to be the cookie.
What am I talking about? I'm not making cookies.
I want to highlight, I love the, happy, healthy, and safe choices. And what struck me on that is I think I've always tried to encourage Claire to make her own decisions. And of course there's parental input and stuff. And I've noticed a shift. Like I used to talk about making good choices and almost implying the right choice, because there is a right choice.
Right.
And
especially with children, they're right or wrong, you're good or bad.
Yeah.
Because that's how we were raised, right?
Right. And I've noticed myself even just this year saying, because she's in 9th grade now and meeting new friends. She's on a soccer team that has 9th through 12th graders. And, as you get older in high school, different choices, different things come in front of you that didn't come in front of you in junior high. And I find myself saying to her, as she's going into new situations, you know what, I'm going to trust you to make really healthy choices. And that was just a shift for me from making the right choice or the choice that mom would make. And I think I'm going to add in the happy and safe, right? It's not just about the healthy choice. Like, if you have to jump off the ledge to get the apple, I think we're going to go for the safe choice there instead of the healthy choice. Although it might be fun, I don't think it's going to be happy in the end. So I like this addition of happy and safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we come by these things as parents and as educators, that we almost stumble into them, some of our greatest lessons. And I think that we're definitely meant to learn them along the way. And kind of leads me to another question that I wanted to dive in more about, like you and your leadership style. And we've already started talking about your parenting. Is when was a moment, and the whole life is open, so whatever comes to mind, when was that moment when you questioned everything?
So it was probably later than it should have been, maybe.
Welcome to the party.
And in reality, I think it happens much more often now. And I would probably say, when I started to question things was when I reached a tension point in my own career. Early in my career, I was super certain about this is the way to approach the project to solve the problem. We're going to be more efficient. Like, this is what we do. And I'm recalling this image of when I was at Virginia Tech recruiting engineering students, and one of the younger recruiters, they did something that was out of line. And I think it was like they put the donuts out before the presentation instead of after, something super ridiculous, right? And I think that I still had that belief that there is a right way to do it. And then when I faced a leader where I just felt like I wasn't able to contribute, even though I knew I had stuff to bring to the table, I had stuff to put on the table, I started to get really curious about my own leadership and wondering how do we grow into leadership? How are some leaders really good at this and some really terrible at it, despite having the same kind of training? And that's what started me off into the research, the quandary, the curiosity into adult development, and how do we as adults make sense of the world? And, every time I think I've got it figured out, I meet a client who kind of shares a piece of themselves that makes me go, wait a minute, no, I'm not sure I really do have it figured out. And I think probably at the core of all of this is I didn't appreciate the complexity of the kinds of things we were facing in the office environment. For example, I didn't appreciate the complexity of it. And anytime a human is involved, it's inherently more complex. And more than that, I didn't value the other perspectives. And if I take it back to where I started in my coaching, I think coaching is not easy. I think I thought it was when I first started, okay, there's a bad leader. Here's what we need to do to fix that leader. and we could easily identify it, do some diagnostics, and here we go, and here's what we need to fix. And sorry to my early clients where that might have been a little too strong an opinion. I think now it's much more, curiosity with people around, why is that? And you seem really certain about that. What is it that's got you, holding that? And I do that pretty regularly now, but probably still not as much as I could.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into, the next couple of questions, like what's something you're still working on or a lesson that's been really impactful in your life and that you'd like to share with those who are listening?
I think that the number one word that comes to mind is patience. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing, whether it's with a coaching client, parenting, or we've recently moved my 90 and 85-year-old parents closer to us, whether it's helping with them. I could use a healthy dose of patience and understanding. My bias is to get things done as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and add to that I have super high expectations. You should be able to you should be able to get from your apartment to the car in this amount of time. Oh, wait a minute. You use a walker. Wait a second. Maybe I need to readjust the expectations in there. And there's value in having high expectations and having a bias for action or speed. But there's also value in kind of savoring the moment and taking the time to just experience people as they are and letting the growth happen at the pace it's meant to happen, rather than the pace I want it to happen. And this year has been particularly interesting. The story that's most coming to mind is watching my daughter who plays soccer. And she's started out in a Parks and Rec kind of league, and then started playing a club team. And I remember when she was young and she was on like the A team, and I was like, oh, all right, she's great. And then when she didn't make the A team and she was on the B team, I found myself kind of like soccer's really more social for her. Like she's really just, like soccer's not really her thing, but she's having fun. And because I think I had this expectation. My husband's a great soccer player. I'm a terrible soccer player. So apparently she got more from me than she did him. She's actually not terrible. I'm going to get to that point of the story. But I found myself having this expectation that because he was a good soccer player and she's playing soccer, she should be at this level. And well, I mean, if you want to stay on the team, you got to be really good. And what I realized this year, as she went into a varsity team that is 9 through 12, there's no JV team. They have a small population of kids that play sports. She was kind of forced into a leadership role on the team. They didn't have a lot of kids, and she had more experience in certain aspects of and but she, I think, didn't have the chance to show them off on the other teams, because she, and I don't mean show off in like, hey, let me show off my skills, but she wasn't given the opportunity. She wasn't put in the position because often the teams were worried about winning. And, we got to have our best defensive line in. So we don't let any goals in. And here, she was put in the role that she could step into and grow into as a freshman. And she's still got 3 more years to continue to grow into that and maybe play other positions. But it was kind of just the aha for me was, now's the time. It didn't have to happen any earlier. Mm-hmm. She's going to keep growing into this. And it's about giving opportunity more than it is about just expecting that without that opportunity, they're going to grow into a thing.
Yeah, just that allowing, right? And allowing things to unfold just as they're meant to, and knowing and trusting in the timeline of things versus our preconceived, ego-generated timeline. We all do it, right? I expected, my house to sell on a certain day, and it didn't, and that was my ego. Like who am I? I don't know. Like, a buyer's going to buy it when they're going to buy it. So with that, what does success look like to you?
one, I think that's a really hard question, because I think there are lots. I think it depends on what lens you're looking through. I think by most accounts, people, you might look at someone's role, their title, and go, oh, they're successful. Mm-hmm. And as I was thinking about this question, I think what came to me is making a difference and enjoying what I do while I make that difference. It's never been about striving for another position or getting that great keynote or something like that for me. And I know that I feel most successful and happy when I'm making a difference and helping, and whatever that looks like. If it's the volunteer event, we've just volunteered at a half marathon, making sure, I got the person their nutrition and it didn't fall on the ground, to helping a client see a new perspective and start to shift their way of thinking, because that has an impact on the people they work with, and it starts to have kind of its own multiplying effect when we can all be making a difference in that way.
Yeah. Who inspires you?
So that was a question you kind of gave me in advance, and I started thinking about it. I'm like, maybe I should say my mom. Maybe there's some that, Liz. Maybe there are all these people that could inspire me, but really, I think I don't have a particular person in mind. But what is really inspiring to me is the people who are sacrificing for others and making their way in the world without a lot. And the images that are coming to mind for me are the parent, the single mother who's working multiple jobs to help their children have a better life than they are, than they see at this moment. It's the people who are, going out of their way to deprioritize their own big busy schedule to go volunteer in the classroom. It's like this amazing nonprofit leader that I just listened to today, who he's a physician, and he started a nonprofit in Tanzania to provide medical care in a remote village. But more than that, it was, how do we not just provide the care? How do we train them to do this on their own? And it's taking time out of, I could go rise in the ranks, but I'm gonna sacrifice something here for others.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Like that's what lights me up too, is that giving, right? That selfless giving. And when you're in a position to be able to do so, I feel like that's what life's about. It is the evolution of our consciousness as humans, and sharing wisdom and igniting that inner spark in others. And again, the premise of your book and your work in the world is really creating multiplier style of leaders. Having that awareness and the tools and the strategies and the skill set to actually be able to deliver that, I think is really beautiful. And so I have one more question, then a fun question, but then I want Sheba to chime in with anything that's coming to her mind as we kind of start to wrap up. But what is your wish for the future of education?
How do I answer that question?
Magic wand.
Do I only get one wish? Or
you can have three. I don't know. I don't know who with three. The genie.
I think my I have kind of a very well, I guess they're both kind of practical, but I wish there was much less reliance or meat given to, or accolades given to the test scores and the achievements and the things that certain people know they need to have on a resume or on an application because it's what gets you in. I wish there was much less emphasis on that. And there was more emphasis on what we were talking about earlier with allowing kids to grow at the rate they're meant to grow, and believing that every kid has the capacity to grow. The end product is going to look different. And I think we struggle with that because we have metrics, and the trouble with metrics in my mind, though, is they can be used against us. Like my daughter's third grade class, her teacher, when the kids, and this is a different district than we're in now, but these were all kids who they were going to pass the third grade reading guarantee, no bones about it. It was an affluent community. They were well prepared. And when the kids were a little bit unruly, they were, making noise. They weren't quite paying attention to the lesson. The teacher said, "No, kids, you better pay attention, or you're not going to pass that third grade. You're not going to make it to the fourth grade." And I think those metrics, and metrics aren't bad. It's how we use them, and it's what emphasis we put on them, and how we talk about them, and what we allow them to define for us. And I think that if we could be better stewards of the data in a way that allows kids to really grow into the beautiful humans they're meant to grow into, I think that would be my wish for education.
Yes, that. We're just going to continue speaking these wishes in through all of the interviews that we're doing on the Conscious Educator Playground podcast, because I think the more that we speak it, and the more that we recognize that we are a unified front in our wishes, we may be speaking different components of them in different ways, but at the end of the day, as conscious educators, we're all on the same page, and we're the ones who are going to revolutionize education. And so I think that that's brilliant, and I appreciate that insight and your brilliance. Sheba, did you have any other questions or thoughts that kind of came to mind?
First of all, I just want to say, so inspiring to be on the call with you, Elise. I was wondering, I'm like, what do I even need to be here for? So thank you just for inspiring me. And it was just so great to meet you.
Likewise, it was a real treat to be here, and I applaud the work that you do, Sandy, and Sheba being in the classroom. I will fully transparently, I spent 2 days, one day with 11th grader. I wasn't even 2 full days. I spent 2 mornings with the back-to-back schedule. the bell rings every 40 minutes, and I did the same presentation, obviously tailored to the kid, but you want every kid to have the same math class, the same whatever. I applaud every single teacher that is out there in the environment that we are in, showing up every single day, giving everything they have to their kids, because even if they only have a little bit to give that day, they're giving way more than I could do every single day. That routine of bell after bell and moving through is hard work. And so thank you, Sheba, for doing that work. Thank you, Sandy, for helping the people like Sheba bring that to the table. And for every educator listening, your job is no joke. I think, I guess if I go back to the wish for education, it probably added on to what I said, is that educators were more respected for the work that they do, because it's a stinking hard job.
It is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I like to kind of wrap up on a fun note, because this is a playground, because part of my wish for education is bringing the play back in. And, I talk about Dr. Stuart Brown's work on play profiles. And I think that it's really kind of just a little insight into who we are as humans. And so if there's any young people watching, I think that even hearing what about our favorite childhood toy or game or adventure was really helps them to kind of see how they can begin to bring that in, and to bring that back into our classrooms and our organizations, and bring the play back in. So with that, Elise, what was your favorite childhood toy, game, or adventure?
The thing that the most vivid childhood memories that I have were spending hours at the arcade across the street from my dad. My dad was a shoe repairman, in the summers, I would spend time hanging out there and basically wandering up and down our little Market Street. It was like 4 blocks. I would throw quarter after quarter into those video games. Cubert was one of my most favorite, but then I always fell off the back of the Cubert board. So then I switched over to Miss Pac-Man, and I played that for hours and hours. And then when I'd run out of quarters, I would go back to wandering the streets. And my aunt worked at an insurance agency. My brother owned a pizza place down at the other end of the street. And then there were like, I loved going into all the stores where I couldn't afford the clothing, and like scanning the walls and seeing what outfits I maybe would never ever wear. But all of this is to say, like, I loved video games. I like, eventually we got Atari, and then the Nintendo, and Tetris was my all-time favorite Nintendo game. But a lot of kind of, and I think part of it's how do the pieces fit together? And I hope the story will make the pieces will fit together. But as I would wander through stores, and I'd stop at my dad's store or my brother's or where my aunt worked, I was just always really curious about who the people were and what were they doing, and chatting with them. And I really think that that's a big part of what's brought me to where I am now, is being curious about who people are, and what they bring to the table, and how do we access all of that. And admittedly, I don't do it all the time, but for sure, I'm a sucker for a video game, and any restaurant, bar that has a Miss Pac-Man, or there is actually a bar near us. This is why my like traumatized memories of Cubert came back up. There's a bar near us. It's a restaurant, and they have a little free video arcade. They have Pac-Man, and they also have Cubert. And I started hopping the thing, and I'm like, I can't do it. I'm gonna blame it on the machine.
That's fantastic. And again, so much of what we play as children does ultimately translate when we find that passion and purpose. And so oftentimes we get stuck trying to figure it out when the cues are usually in what we loved as children. And so I encourage all of you to really not only look at the ways that you are multiplying the other humans around you, but also looking at how you can really bring more play and inspiration into your life. Because, you know, if life's a game, like, let's play, like, let's actually get in and play and really celebrate one another for the unique, amazing humans that we all are. And Sheba, thank you as always for being my beautiful co-host. And Elise, thank you so much for being here and for being my birthday buddy. I am super grateful to you for so many reasons. Thank you both. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Conscious Educator Playground podcast. Bye everyone.
Bye everyone. Thanks so much.